Hi, I'm Dr. Keith Johnson. We human beings have to be very careful about the curse we've placed on ourselves because of the sins that we commit. Unfortunately, one of the reasons we commit sins is because there's pleasure in doing something wrong. I'm not sure why that is, but it's part of our nature. I remember when I was a young kid, it was a long time ago now, but when I was a young kid in Chicago, every now and then I had a couple of friends with me who we'd skip school. We'd hide from elementary school. So we'd go to Horner Park in Chicago, and we'd play around in that big field because nobody cared about who we were or where we were. But every now and then, because it was so close to my dad's shop, he was a locksmith, he would drive by because he was going on a call or something like that. And if we saw him, we would run to the bushes. Well, we didn't quite think that over because later on, somewhere he got a suspect to it. And one day he stopped and walked right to the bushes and said, "What are you doing here? Why aren't you in school?" We gave him the story that school had kind of quit early because they had some kind of big teachers meeting. And Dad didn't really buy it, I could tell, but he kind of let it go. He returned us home, and so we were done for the day. But there's something fun about trying to be who you're not supposed to be, or breaking a rule, or going against some Ten Commandment of some sort. The Bible warns us there's pleasure in sin for a while, and it becomes a habit. Some of the things that we do that we know are wrong, we get different kinds of results out of, and sometimes that results is pleasurable or to our liking, so we sort of like what's happened and we do it again. Stealing is a good example. It's hard if you've gotten away with stealing to stop the habit. That's why shoplifters are so often caught, and that's why security patrols are in some of the big stores all the time, because stealing is such a habit. And then jealousy is an interesting habit. We get jealous because some people are more successful than we seem to be, or we want certain attention that we're not getting that somebody else is getting. So we fight for it. We fight to be jealous. We get used to it. We fight to be jealous at work. We try to move up the ladder. So we do everything we can to get our jealousy out by doing inordinate things that we probably shouldn't do anyway. But jealousy by itself is very habitual. Lying is a good example. There are many habitual liars who have gotten pleasurable things out of some of their lies, and therefore they lie and lie again and again. A lot of people that have that kind of problem. So committing sin can become a habit. It becomes habitual. It becomes something that for some reason we enjoy in its own right. And again, the Bible says there's pleasure in sin for a moment. Well, how do you stop that? How does a good Christian stop his habitual sinning? Unfortunately, there are a lot of Christians that don't. That's why a lot of people don't come to church, because they see Christians sinning against God or doing things that they know are wrong and doing things that they know they're preaching against, and they don't want to become a part of that hypocrisy. But the fact of the matter is, all of us sin, and all of us make the mistakes. In fact, Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. So you've made the step. You've accepted Jesus into your heart. You've committed your life to him, and you're still habitually sinning, which will be true of most of us. And many of those sins are ingrained in our personality. We grew up watching our parents making mistakes and sometimes sinning, and we learn those habits. We live with those habits with our friends and who knows what else. We go someplace we shouldn't. We do something we're not supposed to, or we get mad easy. There's a lot of habits that we can learn and develop. How do you stop it? How do you stop sinning? There's only one easy solution, and it's not easy for everybody because there are some people that have trouble doing it. The one thing that stops habitual sinning, whatever that sin might be, is confession. Romans 1:10 says very clearly, if we confess our sin, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sin and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. In order to stop a habit, you've got to recognize it and you've got to treat it. If you've got a habit where you're always scratching something that itches, that creates some kind of rash on your skin, usually the doctor will give you some kind of prescription, if that's that bad, to make you stop the scratching. We do that with dogs. We put on a collar so that the dog or the animal can't scratch whatever it is that bothers them until they get rid of the infection. You've got to stop the scratching. And confession stops the scratching. Again, very clearly, confession to God about our sin is what made us Christian in the first place. Recognizing our sin and saying to Jesus, I need you in my life. Please forgive me of what I've done. And he does. If we confess our sin, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sin and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. I think the next verse makes it very clear that if you refuse to confess your sin, you're making God a liar because he can't forgive you. You have to give God the chance to forgive. And by the way, sometimes we confess too general. We go to prayer and we ask God for forgiveness of sin, and he does forgive us. He does let us go. He does, so to speak, take care of us. He who knew no sin was made sin for us, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. But confession is difficult. I'm a sinner. Paul said he was the worst of sinners. He said that there was no one that could sin worse than he did, and he had the record of sin. And he did. He killed Christians on a regular basis. And he killed people on a regular basis until he became Paul, until Saul became Paul. His experience was the same thing, that he had sinned against God. And he had many habitual sins that you can see in the Bible still continued to plague him to that day. And I don't know what the problem was, but he had one physical problem, either his eyes or leprosy or epileptic or something, that God would not let him get rid of. He was stuck with it. But confession will stop sin. Even if you sin all the time the same thing, you confess. The only answer you've got for stopping the sin or stopping the judgment of that sin is by confessing to Jesus. Now, I have a strong suggestion that you should directly confess whatever it is that bothers you, that you know is wrong. For example, if you are a habitual liar, then when you talk to Jesus, you need to say, by the way, forgive me for my lying, and talking with him and only him, please. You're expediting your sin from yourself, and it helps you to recognize what's wrong. Well, I'm sorry for this lie, and I'm sorry for this lie today. I'm sorry I lied to George. Now, those three sins, at least you've set in your mind to forgive yourself and to ask Jesus to forgive you. And even if you don't forgive yourself, Jesus is in the midst of forgiving. He promises, as far as the east is from the west, I will remember your sin no more. If by chance, and I don't think you can do this, but if by chance when you go to heaven you went to God and said, God, how could you forgive me? Remember when I did this and this and this? According to the Bible, God says, no, I don't remember that. God doesn't remember the sins you've committed. Jesus took care of all of them. He who knew no sin was made sin for us, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. That's why you and I are in heaven, because God sees the righteousness that Jesus has planted inside us. By his grace, he's transformed our lives. By his grace, he loves us, and he wants to take care of us. So, whatever your problem is here on earth, come to Jesus and realize that confession of sin is the break point that you need to transform your life and your habits. The more you confess your sin, and especially specifically, the more you implant in your mind and heart that this is wrong. So humanly speaking, God can divinely help you to get rid of that sin over a period of time. And even if you don't, at least you're still taken care of by the blood of the cross. God bless you. Give God a chance to let him fill you with his grace. By grace you are saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. Confess. Tell Jesus you're sorry. Try to be specific so that you can help yourself. And may God bless you in every part of your ministry as you talk to others. Experience God's grace and try to understand his love by experiencing that grace, by talking to God more often, and by giving him a chance to take over.